are just different. Weekends on BBC World News.
This is BBC World News. I'm Yalda Hakim. The headlines. A court in London rules that WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange should not be extradited to the US because of fears over his mental health. His fiancée says she's concerned about the US appealing the decision. President Trump is recorded asking the Georgia Secretary of State to find him enough votes to overturn the election result. Democrats say it's a disgrace. And MGM Resorts rolled the dice as the casino chain bids $11 billion for the firm behind Ladbrokes. To Brexit now, and today marks the first full working day with the UK outside the EU. Negotiators came up with a deal which will allow tariff-free trading, but additional paperwork is expected to cause delays at borders. But how will the changes affect businesses and individuals? Well, let's speak to Dr. Meredith Crowley, Senior Fellow at UK in a Changing Europe, and Jacob Kirkegaard, Senior Fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. He joins us from Brussels. Thank you both for joining us. Dr. Crowley, I'll come to you first. We've got a series of questions here from our viewers. Avinash says, will British citizens need work permits for the EU?
Yes, if they're going to stay there for a while to work. No, if they're just traveling across the channel for a quick meeting where they wouldn't be providing a service. So if you want to be in Europe for more than 90 days in a 180-day period, you would need to have a work permit to go to Europe. But if you're just going to meet a client or to go to a conference and you're not actually providing a service or actually selling a good there, then you don't need the work permit.
So, Jacob, suddenly people who didn't have to wait in long queues, this may cause, some kind of sort of queue up at the airport.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you need to be aware that if you are traveling to and from Europe from Great Britain, you're going to go in a different lane. So yes, expect potentially longer delays. But, as the nuisances go, I mean, I think that's probably one of the more manageable ones.
I'll come to you, Jacob, on this one. Cornelius says, what are the potential advantages of Brexit?
Well, I suppose there are political and economic potential benefits. Potentially, the UK is now, if you like, a more sovereign country. It is no longer constrained by European rules and regulations and the European Court of Justice. So it allows, in principle, the UK government to diverge from current rules, which are still by and large the existing EU ones in the future. It can obviously decide what kind of immigration system it wants. It can strike its own free trade deals with third countries and the like. In economic terms, obviously this new freedom also includes the ability to change regulations, find new ways of doing things. But I think it's an important thing to recognize that in the new trade deal with the EU, there are provisions that if the UK chooses to diverge too far from existing EU regulations, the EU has its sovereign right to impose trade restrictions on the UK. So it's kind of there is a pros and cons to this. But I would say, by and large, it's a mostly political benefits of sovereignty.
Meredith, what, in your view, are some of the potential advantages of Brexit?
So there's very few economic advantages, to be perfectly frank. I think I agree with Jacob, and then the biggest advantages from a British perspective are maybe a little bit more democratic legitimacy, in the sense of if you're a business in Britain and you didn't like a regulation, it's now a little bit easier to go to your MP and start a process of having that law or rule evaluated and potentially changed. Economically, all businesses operating in Britain now have to file customs declarations. It's much more difficult now for a British-based financial firm to sell its services to somewhere within the EU. So there's a lot more costs going on, I think, is the main story that we can take away from this. For very large firms operating in the UK and large multinationals, they're already operating in other markets around the world. So really big British exporters are also exporting to the United States and China, where they don't have an agreement. So filing extra paperwork for those companies isn't so much of a burden. There's a cost, but they have their own internal infrastructure to manage customs already. The real killer is for the small and medium-sized British enterprises that have been exporting to the EU duty-free and paperwork-free, for decades. They still get duty-free access to the EU market, but there's a lot more paperwork to fill out. And so one of the worries is that because, say, a potential French customer knows, oh, if I go to Britain to buy something, I have to go through a lot more paperwork, that French customer might just say, oh, well, actually, I can find very similar products from someone selling it from Germany or Belgium. So there's a little bit of a concern that British producers are going to be put into a relative disadvantage when they want to sell into the EU.
So when we, because of this sort of paperwork and the red tape, are we likely to see more delays then?
Probably it's going to be a bit of a mixed bag. So I think eventually the whole system will be streamlined to a point where it will look like the US-Canada border, where occasionally you're going to get hiccups and backed up traffic. But for the most part, the large firms that are trading a lot will get a sort of expedited customs clearance, because when their shipments are inspected, they're always going to be clean and legitimate and quite very well done. So as you get more experience, the very large exporters will kind of have a bit of an expedited process. So once that's set up, it should go reasonably smoothly. The bottlenecks are going to be more for the smaller intermittent exporters. So if you only ship something once a year, the customs officials won't know how honestly you're filling out the forms, and they're going to have an incentive to scrutinize those shipments a little bit more diligently. And so that's where you're going to start to see bottlenecks, I think, in the longer run.
Jacob, Sarah asks, if I buy things online in the UK and want them shipped to me in France, do I pay customs and VAT when the parcel arrives at my home in France?
Well, I mean, first of all, you are not going to face customs because there's a zero customs agreement. But as Meredith just said, it really depends a lot on the size of the e-commerce retailer that you're using, because the company or the retailer has several options. If it's a big company, it probably already has a service fulfillment center in France. So, you as the customer, you don't really feel any difference, except that obviously you'll be paying the local VAT in France. But if it's a smaller and medium-sized online portal, there are other options. You may, if the company simply makes you pay the French VAT to the delivery courier or the shipping company, that's not necessarily much of an additional hassle, but it obviously means you'll be paying a lot more in freight. And certainly the no-cost shipping that many websites offer is no longer an option. The company may also choose to be registered in France already. That's obviously an additional cost for the online retailer. But then you will again simply be buying in France and have it sent to you under local French VAT. And finally, the company may also choose to make you, the customer, the sort of legal importer of the good that you purchased into France. That would then require that they give you, or you give them, sorry, a power of attorney. So it means a lot more red tape. But again, you would just be buying the good, paying the local French VAT. So again, fundamentally, it means more red tape. It means bigger differences between small and large retailers. And ultimately, it also will likely mean frequently higher costs on average.
And Meredith, I suppose that goes back to your point then, that it sort of deters people from buying things from, say, Britain because of those extra costs.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a little bit of a hassle factor. I mean, if you buy things from the US or Canada right now into Britain, there's a customs declaration that the seller would put on it, or the sender would. And, Christmas presents from grandma that I've received have required VAT duty paid, when the goods arrive in the UK. So it's a little bit more complicated.
Meredith, Sonia says, would dual nationals be affected by Brexit? I currently have French and British passports.
It depends precisely on what Sonia is hoping to do. So she can work in both countries, so she wanted to do an unskilled job that doesn't require any special qualification, that's fine. It's a little bit more complicated if Sonia is practicing in a regulated field. So she has a professional qualification like being a lawyer or an architect. So in that case, it depends where she's located right now, and what she would have to do is if she were, say, a lawyer practicing in the UK and wanted to practice law in France, she would have to go to France, the French authorities, and make sure that they approve her qualification. Once her qualification's approved, then she can practice in both countries.
Jacob, Ian asks, if I drive to France, will I be able to bring back large quantities of wine, beer and cheese?
I think in short, the answer is yes. I mean, first of all, if you were to go to Northern Ireland, there would be virtually no restrictions. In principle, the restrictions might emerge if you were to go from Northern Ireland to Great Britain. But if you were to go from France directly to Great Britain, the usual, if you like, customs-free restrictions would apply, namely that you could only bring stuff for your own consumption. Now, in the case of cheese, I don't believe that there is any sort of legal restrictions on what is defined as cheese for your own consumption. So you could, in principle, bring as much as you want. But that is not true for beer and wine. In the case of beer, this is, I believe, 42 liters per person. And in the case of wine, it's 18 liters of wine. And in addition, you can take a couple of 4 liters of hard liquor, I believe, and up to 9 liters of champagne. So there are some restrictions. And as I said, own consumption. And also you need to carry the stuff with you yourself, meaning in your own vehicle or your own luggage.
Meredith, Caroline asks, what does the Brexit deal mean for British families who wish to host European au pairs?
They're a bit out of luck. So it's going to be more complicated for a young person from the EU to come to Britain to work as an au pair. So Britain's moved to this points-based immigration system, which means you have to have a certain minimum income and you have to have a certain amount of skills in order to work in the UK going forward. Au pairs are kind of a funny class of person in the sense that there's special visa regimes in lots of countries. So the UK currently allows au pairs from some countries to come as a sort of cultural exchange. So in the future, it's very likely that the UK could look to the EU and say, can we set up an au pair type special visa? So the au pairs could come in either as a student or as a special cultural exchange class. But at the moment, it's fortunately, if your au pair is not here now, you're out of luck. I believe for au pairs that are currently in the country, they're going to be allowed to extend because of the EU settled status system.
Really fascinating and informative listening to you both. Thank you so much for answering the questions of our viewers. That was Dr. Meredith Crowley and Jacob Kirkegaard. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, stay with us here on BBC World News. Still to come, Ben will be here with all the latest business news, including MGM Resorts roll the dice as the casino chain bids $11 billion for the firm behind Ladbrokes.
The seafood that the world loves is delicious and safe too. Indian seafood, safe and delicious. Promoted by the Marine Products Export Development Authority of India.